All right.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening around the world. My name is Doug Brunke. I am the founder and CEO of Global Chamber, and I have another Doug here. And it's a constant case for confusion. Doug W, Doug B. We're working on some things together. We've known each other for quite a long time. He's the smarter, more handsome one. I'm just the guy who's got the globe behind me and working on a global basis. And Doug W is working on a global basis. When we first met, he was in Washington, D.C., and he was thinking about doing more in New York and Philadelphia, and we were working on that and helping, hopefully helping to expand his business. And ultimately, he landed in New York. And so he's spending a lot of time, maybe most of his time in New York, including even upstate New York, where, like, literally right across the Susquehanna River from where I went to high school in Vestal, New York, which is kind of weird, upstate New York. Not everybody knows it. Doug W knows that. And more importantly, for everybody here, he knows sales. And what's really cool is he understands marketing and how marketing feeds sales. There are salespeople, there are marketing people, and sometimes never the two will meet. In Doug, it comes together. So we're really excited to have this conversation today. Doug W is going to walk us through some ideas and some thoughts around how this all works to generate more sales. And there'll be some Q&A and there'll be interaction. And so, Doug, the floor is yours.
Well, Doug, thank you so much. And hi, everybody. It's an honor to be here. Again, I am Doug Wendt. I'm a very proud Global Chamber member. I've been a Global Chamber member for the better part of a decade now. As Doug Brunke pointed out, I started as a member of the Baltimore, Washington regional chapter, and then became a member and an advisory board member for the New York City chapter. And actually, we are expanding. We're planning, we actually have team members in Australia and in Toronto, and we're working on adding an office in London. So I'm very honored that the Global Chamber has been a critical part of our growth trajectory and our global journey. So why am I here and what do we want to focus on? So I run a company that sells and implements software for sales and marketing. Many of you have probably heard of the product. The product is called HubSpot. It's a widely recognized platform, particularly for small growth stage and up to middle market companies. So you can think of HubSpot as a technology that's really good for organizations that are really trying to master integration of marketing and sales efforts. In addition to that, I literally spend about 80% of my day every day selling. So actually, I've had 5 sales calls today so far. I have 2 more this afternoon. So I am constantly experiencing and working through the question of how to drive the sales effort forward. What I thought we'd do is I'd really like to get some thoughts on the table around some of the challenges in different approaches to selling. And most of us, not all of us, but most of us in the Global Chamber community are probably professional services or sellers. People who are offering consulting expertise or capabilities that other businesses, so B2B, professional selling environment, right? And, there are certain methods that we can use to generate new opportunities. And I want to talk about each of those and their pros and cons. I tend to think of this in a couple of different buckets. The first one, which a lot of us, I know historically I've relied on, and I know a lot of us rely on, is building strong referral networks, what some of us call centers of influence. Okay, so that's building my referral network. That's one category. The next category is working through existing customers and seeking referrals and continuing business with them and how to maximize that. The third category is marketing driven, what a lot of people call inbound. And then the fourth category is sales driven or outbound, right? So the first 2 have to do with developing warm introductions. The second 2, typically we're starting with someone who's a potential stranger, okay? And we're trying to build a connection to them in order to generate a deal. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about each of those 4 categories. I myself have practiced all 4. But let me pause there, and I'd like to ask the group, if a couple of you want to share, like, what are your primary ways that you generate new business? Is it one of those four categories? Is it like, overwhelmingly my business is referral driven? Or, are there other methods that I haven't mentioned? Again, just to summarize, sort of the four categories that I described is building your referral network, building business through and with existing clients. Those are sort of two halves to the whole, okay, on that side of the equation, that warm side. And then outbound and inbound, right? Outbound being sales driven historically and inbound being marketing driven. What are your experiences? How do you all typically generate new business opportunities? If you look back over the last few years, where did you see the bulk of your new business coming from? And I'm going to ask people just to unmute and feel free to share your thoughts. Anyone want to volunteer?
Come on out.
Yeah. I can start calling names like a middle school teacher, but I'd prefer to go the volunteer route.
Hey, Doug.
Yes. Hi.
Hi, Eduardo here.
Hello, Eduardo.
I'm a consultant that helps companies locate contract manufacturing options in Mexico.
Yes.
I'm also part of the advisory board here in Phoenix, and I also lead the advisory board here in Phoenix for the Global Chamber. So I can relate to your experience with Global Chamber.
Yes.
So yeah, I think I get most of my clients or referrals. I get most of my clients through referrals and through the website, mainly, right? So don't see big change in that part. Website traffic, getting the website, getting more experience in the web and the searches probably has been very helpful. And also maintaining and creating new relationships. Probably that's a big driver of business.
And do you find, in your experience, that that your website traffic, have you done a lot of specific work or invested a lot of money or effort into a specific search optimization strategy? Or is it more, it's sort of been, not necessarily accidental, but very natural, organic, you've been out there and people are finding the website, and maybe it's not scientific. You don't have a particular, some people are very successful with website and inbound without a big strategy behind it. Others spend lots of money and lots of time getting that highly precise effort. What's your experience been?
So I've been doing it for 5 years. The first year I did do some investments and some effort to rank the website higher, and did hire a couple of guys to help me with that. But for the past 4 years has been organic, honestly. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, well, that's good. That's good that you're having that success. And then the referral piece as well, obviously a big part of it. How about some other participants today? Are any of you, I'm curious, focused, on a significant investment or a really technical effort around search traffic? Or are most people here primarily generating business through referrals and client relationships? Anybody else want to volunteer? And by the way, thank you, Eduardo, for hopping on and being willing to share a little bit of your experience.
Happy to do it. Thanks.
You got it. All right, so I'm going to show you guys something that has to do specifically with where search is headed. So let's talk about that piece. Since Eduardo, you brought up, we're going to start with the two examples that you gave. So in terms of, generating business through the inbound and outbound methods, right? Where people who you don't know personally are engaging with you, right? The inbound method has historically been tied to either organic search, right? which is building content that's optimized to maximize, showing up very well ranked on search engine result pages. Some people abbreviate that as a SERP, search engine result pages, typically Google, right? So in that case, you're spending a lot of time and creating a lot of content. It's a content-driven strategy, okay? Other people take a more advertising or paid approach. That's where you're paying for advertising positions on Google, search engine optimization, search engine marketing, but also maybe you're placing ads on LinkedIn, on Facebook, et cetera, okay? One thing that's really interesting about that space is this. And I'm about to show you an example. So this definitely is on the marketing side of the discussion, but this is a very real example. So last year, my company secured what in our industry is known as SOC 2 compliance. SOC 2 is a standard for IT security. And since we implement technology for companies, it's very important. Now, we are not the only SOC 2 compliant HubSpot partner. There aren't that many, but there are about 20 or 30 SOC 2 compliant HubSpot partners. We did zero SEO effort around this. We simply put out a press release and put it on our homepage of our website. But the AI tool that Google developed, if you type in SOC 2 HubSpot partner, okay, what's interesting is that we are the only HubSpot partner that comes up in the AI descriptive response. Now, we don't show up, I don't think we show up anywhere on the first 3 results. We show up in the 4th result here, okay, but you'll see there are a lot of other HubSpot partners that show up here. But interestingly enough, we are at we're the only people, and by the way, again, this was by accident. I didn't even know about this. Somebody else happened to mention it to me that they had done a search for SOC 2 HubSpot partners, and we showed up in the AI results. So while that's great for us in this case, okay, the challenge is we have no idea how the AI tool developed its results, right? It's not necessarily based on who would rank at the top. It's based on whatever the machine learning algorithm determined, okay, was the most authoritative whole language answer. So this is significant because, yes, in this case, we got lucky, but the reality is it throws the world of search optimization into a real tailspin. If indeed, going forward, the average user is going to rely more and more on the AI overview. Because at least right now, nobody really knows how the AI overviews are generated and therefore how to make sure that you show up in them. So there's an interesting dynamic here at play. That doesn't mean anyone who's currently generating, new leads from their website is like suddenly doomed. It's not like that. Some companies are experiencing dramatic drops, but by and large, what this is a new trend, and it's a trend to be aware of. So it happened to work out for us in this case, but in a lot of cases, we'd be on the other side of that equation where we worked really hard to get a really good search placement, but then the AI tool didn't pick us up at all, okay? So one of the important sort of lessons I think of the day is it's dangerous to rely on one method of lead generation alone. That even includes networks. That even includes current clients and referral partnerships. Referral networks, like everything else, go up and down. A lot of people, as you can imagine, including myself, before COVID struck, I was primarily generating leads through in-person relationship development. We actually took the whole idea of a referral network a step further and developed our own branded program called the B2B Growth Forum, trademarked and everything, its own website, all of that. And we established a chapter in New York City. And in fact, under the B2B Growth Forum, we did co-programming with the Global Chamber. I remember literally the week before COVID hit New York, we had done a program, a co-branded program or a co-marketed program with the Global Chamber chapter and the B2B Growth Forum. And of course, that whole, in-person machine, the wheels came off for the next, 3.5 years, basically. So I think that nobody can be necessarily, not a small company, good at all methods, but it's important to at least not have all your eggs in one basket. I generally recommend trying to focus on two, baskets, two sources, as your areas of focus. And I like the idea that Eduardo presented of one of those being very much high touch in person focus, warm leads, and the other one being focused on more the cold side of the equation, whether that's inbound or outbound. So let me show you an example of where technology can help us to nurture and build our networks. And then I want to talk a little bit about some of the other methods and some of the challenges and opportunities with those methods. So I'm just going to pop up an example. This is my contact record in our HubSpot system. I think HubSpot's great, but I'm not here to promote HubSpot. My goal here is just to show that it's really important to use some kind of customer relationship management or a CRM software, because you can keep track of your contacts, their affiliations, and any relationships. So for example, I track when I create a deal record, okay, to track a new sales opportunity, one of the things that I track is the relationship partner and whether or not this was referred. And I can go back at the end of the year and I can say, Eduardo referred me 3 opportunities and I won 2 of those. I really need to focus on building my partnership with Eduardo, okay? I can also track when I've introduced people to one another based upon what our system calls an association, but there are lots of different names, depending on what tool you use. But you can see here, I can build out the nature of these relationships. So a lot of us work with clients that have multiple different other consultants at the table. So maybe I work with companies that do land development, and I want to keep track of who is a construction management firm, who is the prime contractor, the general contractor, the GC, who are the subcontractors, who's the architect. I can do all of that in a good CRM tool by tracking the relationships in the system. And I think that's really important because you're going to start to see trends in your referral networks of who's bringing you good business. Also, who's working on a lot of projects that maybe you haven't really developed a referral partnership with, okay? So understanding the power of your network and planning that and then prioritizing that is really, really powerful. One other thing that I've seen a lot of folks do is develop programming specifically for their referral network. So I have a client and friend who runs a CPA firm in the Northeast in Maryland. And every year they do, not only do they do an annual client appreciation event, which is a great opportunity to build referrals, but they do 2 events a year just for their referral network. One is like a summer fall social, and one is an annual kickoff event at the beginning of the year. They bring those people together, they convene. One of the key messages, I think, is if we're going to build really strong referral networks, we want to be conveners as well as connectors, right? So there's sort of 3 responsibilities that a person has when they're trying to build a strong referral network. One is, you need to give in order to get, right? It's always a 2-way street. That's the first part. The second part is to connect. So, I'm already thinking like, who do I know that would be a good introduction for Eduardo? Making those warm connections. That's how you build that network effect, right? And then the third is convening, bringing people together, whether it's in a virtual event like this or an in-person event. And I would encourage you to think about using whatever style is best for you. I have a friend who runs an intellectual property law firm, and he is really a small dinner kind of person. He loves bringing, it would be a salon, right? He loves bringing together groups of 8 to 12 people, sharing a meal, breaking bread, having some good wine, and that's what he loves to do. So he's built his business development machine around that, around these small group dinners. I know other people who have other interests, obviously sometimes it's maybe sports and bringing people to sporting events. Whatever it is, make that a key theme so that people develop that consistency in their relationship with you. Okay. That's what's going to keep you top of mind and keep you engaged. Another thing that I want to emphasize that when it comes to nurturing relationships is we need to think about the long tail impact. So for example, our company does monthly web events. Sometimes those web events have 50 people in them. Sometimes they have 5, you know? And if I only looked at the low numbers, sometimes I would say, well, why are we doing this? But what's interesting is, in addition to the people who attend the event and the impact that that has on them, obviously that's building brand loyalty and brand engagement. I've had people reach out to us. Okay, I had a medical device company CEO from New Jersey reach out to me randomly by email one day. And I mean, literally, I'd never talked to this person. I didn't know him from anything. Now, he was in our database, okay, and he'd received outreach from our company. He'd been invited to some web events and some other programs, but he'd never responded. Never responded in like 4 years of being in our database. So I had no idea why he reached out, but he literally wrote me an email and said, "Hi, Doug. My name is so-and-so, and we were talking in our executive management meeting today. We think that we might want to talk to you about providing services to us." How often does a prospect reach out and say, "Hey, I'd like to book time on your appointment so you can sell me something"? So of course I asked him, when we actually had our call, and he did become a client, by the way, I asked him, where did this come from? Like, what made you think to call us? And he said, "I've never registered for a webinar. I don't think I've ever communicated with you, but I've seen your communications. And I saw that you are consistently bringing thought leadership to the table around," and his particular topic was they were already using HubSpot in one area of the business. They were considering expanding using it in another area of the business. And one thing that we talk a lot about is how to integrate different business functions using HubSpot. So he said, "I just got the impression that you guys are the subject matter experts in this." And so I thought to reach out because they were having an executive meeting, he and his VPs of marketing, sales, and operations. And they said, "We need an expert who can help us weave all this together." And the CEO said, "I think I know the company." So don't presume that only the direct impact is the only impact. It is the overall impact of the consistency of your efforts. Remember, if you hold a networking event for your referral network 4 times a year, the people who didn't attend still know that you're out there holding consistent programming and building your network. That keeps you top of mind. It gains respect. It builds credibility and recognition. So I always encourage clients and colleagues, don't get discouraged. Don't assume that just because maybe you have low attendance at something or low this or low that, that means low impact. That's often a misnomer. And I've seen it prove out time and time again. So again, I want to thank Eduardo for calling out that in his case, he's using 2 primary tools. Okay. On the list of options, the 4 options that I described, in my experience, most small professional service firms and experts, okay, rely on referral networks overwhelmingly as option, as number one, as the number one way they generate new business. Typically, the second category is either my website, as in Eduardo's case, or it is my existing customers, okay? And that's another area where you can be very successful with not a lot of effort, but you can triple that success with a little bit of strategic effort, okay? The area that usually gets the least play is which one? Who's keeping track of the 4 approaches that I took? Which one have I not emphasized here?
Inbound.
Right. Inbound and cold outbound, right? Inbound and outbound. Yep. Thank you, Olivier. So the reason I think that a lot of people are hesitant about those methods is they're technically complex. Okay. And they're constantly changing. Just look at the example I gave of the search engine, right? And the fact that AI is now changing how search is done. And we don't know the formula. So it's kind of hard to hit the target when you don't know the formula to hit it. That said, cold outreach and strategic inbound can be very successful, okay? But they do require attention to detail, and they do typically require some investment. Now, one of the things that I've been learning a lot about, so one strategy that we use is actually cold outreach. We reach out to people by email, phone, and LinkedIn who are in our target, markets and who meet our ideal customer profile. And we ask for a meeting. And it's very interesting because, there are companies that do lead generation services, right? And they'll provide that lead generation service to you, which is great. What I find fascinating is the nuance of what it takes to convert those people into opportunities. And I want to talk about this for a minute. I think the other reason small professional firms tend to hesitate about those approaches is because when you meet a total stranger for, let's say, a 30-minute Zoom call, you have but moments to convince them that the conversation with you is worth continuing. And that's very daunting. And I can tell you as a person who does hundreds of these that I'm constantly learning about what works and what doesn't. So one of my messages for today is I encourage everyone here to practice having what I call a discovery call, okay, which is a 20 to 30-minute conversation with someone who's expressed maybe the mildest of interest, but where there's a potential opportunity to do business. And the key in those kinds of conversations is giving as much as you get. It goes back to like referral networks, okay? So, roughly half that time should be spent encouraging the other person to tell you about their business, but you also need to be comfortable telling them about yours, very much like a referral partner discussion. You go to a networking event, you agree with someone else to meet for coffee, you meet for coffee. Maybe you're going to spend about 30 to 40 minutes together over coffee, and you want to learn about each other's business. Interestingly enough, it's very similar when you're meeting with someone for that discovery call. But there are nuances to it, and it's really important to research and come in to a conversation like that prepared to get to know them pretty quickly. And that's often a challenge for all of us. This is another area where a CRM tool or some kind of a platform is really, really critical. So, when you get a warm introduction from the Global Chamber, try to use a discovery discussion format. When I do these calls, I typically say, we can do this in one of two ways. I can go first and tell you about my firm and a little bit about what we do and how we might be applicable in your world. And you can tell me about your business and where you're looking to take it. But which would you like to do first? Would you like me to go first or you to go first? I find that asking that question at the outset helps reduce a little bit of the stress of the fact that this is a new meeting with a new person. And you never know the personality of the other individual. Some people want to get right into what they want, and they want to have you listen to them first. Others need to warm up, and they want to listen and observe you before they decide whether to tell you things. So I just flat out ask them which they would prefer. And generally speaking, I would say about 2 out of every 3 times they want me to go first. 1 out of every 3 they go first. Okay. So now you're giving some control, some power, some authority to the other person. So now it's their meeting. That's really important to me. I want the other person to feel like this meeting isn't me just driving. I want them to feel like they're driving and I'm participating. So I'm asking them, how would you like the flow to go? Okay. At the same time, I'm also very focused on keeping an eye on the clock. Doug has learned this because we've been having a series of meetings together on some technology strategy questions. And I actually when I do virtual meetings, I keep a clock on my desk, a countdown clock. And when I get to the last 3 or 4 minutes, I'm talking about what are our next steps? Where do we want to go from here? Let's check calendars for a next meeting. So I want to encourage you to really think about that flow and try to find a way to do it on a regular basis. Sales is like surgery. The only way to really get good at it is to practice it 100 or 1,000 times until it's second nature. So let me pause there again. I'm going to open it back up to the discussion. What are some areas that you all have experienced challenges What are some situations that you've encountered awkwardness, or, I really tried this strategy to develop maybe my centers of influence, 2 years ago and it kind of fell flat. What are some challenges that some of you have experienced in your own business development and sales efforts? Hello. Yes.
That was so wonderful. So sales is like surgery. Okay.
It
So
is.
practice.
Yes.
I've had some practice, and my personality is to be a little bit more friendly. And so sometimes when I get on these sales calls, I'm, let's get to know each other. And so I have been on calls where people are like, okay, let's just get down to business. They're ready to sell me something. And then I can be totally turned off by that. And so I wonder how you like, I would have liked to have taken that back to a neutral standpoint. And so maybe you could address that. And then I actually had a situation where I really felt like this is going so good. Like we got to next points and everything. And then I didn't hear from the person. And so then I sent a follow-up email and I didn't hear from them again. And then I thought, okay, somewhere along this line, I misunderstood some cue, something happened. And so I think I sent 3 emails, which maybe was too much, because by the time it's 3 emails, I feel like I'm off of your radar. So then I wish you could address that scenario as well.
Yeah, those are both great examples. Let me address the second one first, and then we'll go back to the first one, because the second one, I want to dig right into that. In that example, I'm curious, were you setting a next meeting in each meeting, and then they said, I don't need another meeting, I just need the proposal? Or were you like, great, I'll write a proposal and I'll send it to you?
So when we
Or a
got,
statement of work? Yep.
well, actually, I'm not, well, I should be transparent, right? So I was on another call and I was a little bit late getting on that call.
Sure.
Right. And then they sent me a text or an email and said, are we still in? And I was like, I'm sorry, I'm ending another. So that may, sometimes that turns people off totally. I don't know, but I mean, so I accept that. But we got to the end of the conversation. Now I'm watching the clock to be respectful, because I've already maybe not been so respectful. And then I said, okay, no, he said, so what we should do now, like he was kind of guiding it, what we should do now is da da da. So I said, great, here's what I will do. I will he was going to summarize our call. And I said, that's okay. I have AI, I have my notes. I will summarize it. And then I will get you a proposal over and we'll see if we go further, right? And leaving it open.
Yes. So that's solid, but I will tell you that the data shows overwhelmingly that your likelihood of getting a sale goes up 4 to 5 times, 4 to 5x, by presenting that proposal in a meeting. So it's not that there's anything wrong with sending it, but it de-emphasizes the strategic value of what you've created. It's nothing personal. It's just how humans perceive information. 99% of the time I say, great, let's get a meeting on deck and I will walk you through our statement of work and what we're recommending. And now we're having a discussion, okay? And that way, if there's any feedback, if there are any changes, if they wince at something, if the price seems too high or too low, you're getting that real-time feedback. And I've actually changed proposals on the spot. I'm like, let me create a second version of this while we're talking and let's get closer to the goal together. I try to treat this as a collaborative process where we're building something together, okay? I come with a fully built out first version when we meet. But even literally this week, I had one prospect that doesn't happen too often, but it does, who said, I'm not interested in another meeting. I want you to send me a proposal. And I said, fine. And I did. And then I marked the probability of that deal closing as like 10%. Okay. It's not always that way. I've had the occasional customer sign an agreement without another meeting, but it is by far the exception. And by presenting the proposal in a meeting, you're also demonstrating the thoughtfulness of what you put into it. And that creates a psychological perception on the prospect's mind they're not necessarily aware of this, but like, wow, this person's really putting a lot of effort for me. And it changes the dynamic. So I always remind, particularly in professional services, my colleagues that, you know, bottom line is with no discussion, there is no decision. Right. And so you don't know, like maybe they lost interest, maybe they got buried in other projects. Good. First of all, there's a huge chance that had absolutely nothing to do with you. I know in my case, I've literally said this on LinkedIn. This is a fact. I was trying to buy a certain type of software from my company. I did sales cycles with 3 vendors. All of them said, I'll send you a proposal. They all sent good proposals. And then I got buried in other projects for the next 2 months. And I never got back to it. And if one of them had said, let's keep meeting. So what I try to do in most cases is I'll try to set a meeting cadence as if we're already in a project together. Like I pretend we're already in a paid engagement, not in terms of me giving away free advice, but in terms of cadence. So I'll say, Frank, you know, we're meeting today, you know, Thursday at 12:30. Hey, why don't we meet same time next week? I'll come prepared with this. You put together your questions about that. Let's discuss this in that session. And now we're developing a relationship and we're having an ongoing dialogue. And the goal really is to have them sign an agreement to continue the relationship they've already previewed and experienced. So it's challenging. Look, it's challenging for me, but I've learned I have to be relentless about it. Those are great question. I wanted to go back to your first question. You talked about a situation where it kind of got out of balance. Can you just give me a little bit more context to that?
I think in this situation, I think that she was not, we were not coming neutral, right? So it was a discovery call. And so my understanding was that there was going to be some back and forth, but she was not doing, she was ready to sell. I mean, she threw up her, like, you know, everything on the screen. And I was just like, whoa, because I wasn't really ready to buy. I was understanding what she did. And it never went back neutral. And then she just started like sending me emails but I'm the type of person, if I'm not really interested, no matter what you're selling, I'm going to say, this is not the time for me, contact me next year. But a lot of people don't do that.
Sure. So, I mean, there are limited things you can do when the other person isn't respecting the balance. The best thing to do, I think, would be to sort of, and you probably did try to do this, is like, okay, let's take a step back and let me tell you a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish. I really need you to understand our goals. And what I'd like to do is have a tailored discussion around what I'm trying to achieve, you know, that kind of thing, to try to rebalance the conversation, you know. Again, you're hoping that, you know, it's a little bit different when you're the prospect because it's the other person's job to maintain balance, right? And make you feel warm and welcomed in the conversation. Sometimes, so one thing that's a challenge, I've had prospects who they want to go first and we're 28 minutes into a 30-minute call and they haven't taken a breath. Okay. And that happens too. That's actually a yellow flag for me because one of the weird dynamics is if people can't stop talking about their problems, they may never get around to solving them. So it's sort of an interesting, okay. But what I will say is there's obviously a lot here, you know, time out, John, time out. I got it. I understand I try not to do this. This is probably not a good thing. John, I don't want to hear from you anymore. So don't do that part. But, you know, there's a lot to absorb here and I really want to dig in and understand it. And I appreciate all that you've shared. Let's grab time on next Tuesday to continue the conversation. And I'll send an agenda that we can follow so we start to structure the priorities of the problems we want to solve. That's probably the best way to work that back into disciplined flow, right? Because at the end of the day, again, we're project managing. What we're project managing is a decision process, right? And the other person has a problem that requires a solution. In that example where those 3 vendors, none of them set a follow-up meeting with me, my company was in pain for months because I never got around to making a decision. It's not like it was a neutral issue. I literally left money on the table and had more pain in my company because I delayed by another 2 to 3 months the decision of what platform to use. In this case, it was for project management. So literally, not only did the salespeople hurt themselves, they hurt me. I was like, this is crazy, you know, because I got so busy. And that's the last thing I want to mention on your other example is I would beg all of us never to presume that just because a prospect goes to you that they're not interested. Let them tell you they're not interested. Keep following up. It doesn't have to be, I don't understand why you haven't gotten back. It could be, I'm sure you're really busy, but I also know this is a really important priority. So unless you tell me otherwise, I'm going to make a note to touch base every 3 weeks. I kind of feel in my psychology that 2 weeks is too frequent for someone who's not responding, but a month feels too long. So I'll say roughly every 3 weeks to see if this is the right time. If it's not, you can tell me. But, I want you to know that I know this is important to you and I know how busy people get. So whether we solve this problem today or we solve it down the road, I want to be the resource that you think of. And I haven't forgotten that this is a priority for you. So what would be, I'm going to answer a question that Eduardo asked.
Thank
What would
you.
be
So helpful.
Oh, yeah,
There's-
absolutely. Thank
Hey,
you.
hey, Doug, also Ruby has her hand up.
Oh, Ruby. Okay, we'll do Ruby and then Eduardo. Absolutely. Ruby, go for it.
Hi, thank you, Doug. Great presentation. I actually have two questions. So I'm in the business of helping foreign companies expand into Ghana.
Yes.
And most of the time we need to do market research and we need to call on businesses to collect data. Most of the time you write to request for meetings, they will not respond. And one of the things that we do is to do cold calling. So what would you recommend we do when we prepare for those cold calling? I would like to hear your take on that. And then my second
Absolutely.
question got to do with proposals. Most of the time we spend so much time preparing proposals for potential clients. They receive the proposal and we never hear from them again. And I'm beginning to think, should we be charging for those proposals?
That is a great question. You've got two really spectacular questions. And actually, your questions also lead into Eduardo's question. So it's all kind of coming together in a flow here. So thank you. Question number one, how to prepare and sort of ramp up a cold calling program. So the biggest challenge with cold calling is honestly burning out the cold caller. Okay, this has been my experience. I know lots of people the same experience. So you want to start, if you're starting a new cold calling effort, start warm. Start with existing customers and networks. I know it's not true cold calling, but it allows your cold calling person to talk to people who are friendly to the company. I'm calling to see if there's more business you'd be interested in doing, or do you know anybody? And you start to develop their confidence in the offering. It gives you a chance to warm up the discussion. Okay, and the talking points with friendlies. So that's my first recommendation is start with your network, use it as a soft opportunity to potentially get some incremental business, because at the end of the day, cold calling, AI is coming for cold calling, but at least for now, cold calling is still about hiring a person, whether they're contract or freelance or FTE, and having that person feel comfortable and confident in the job. Okay, that's point number one. Point number two is have them understand, and you need to understand that the goal is to have good conversations. Sometimes people really over-focus, in my opinion, on, I want to have like the right conversation with the right prospect and the right this, and I need to have this outcome. It'll freeze your cold caller up so much because a lot of people aren't going to necessarily be at that point and in that conversation. And the key is to get into flow. So if your cold caller sets appointments with people who are in your list, but maybe they're not interested in buying today, it's more of an informational call. At least in the early phases, don't discard those or take those as negatives. Those are, I call those introductory calls. Sometimes those introductory calls set the stage for opportunities that are 6 to 12 months, 18 months down the road. So the key is to develop a relationship with that person, start a conversation, invite them to stay informed, and then soft schedule a meeting. It could even be 4 months out. Let's reconnect. It's sometime down the road, but let's put something soft on the calendar. Okay. And then the last piece of advice around cold calling is you're going to get a ton of voicemails. So one key thing to consider, it's not always the right approach, but It's a technology to consider is a technology called voicemail drop. So the advantage to voicemail drop is it allows you to leave a voicemail without the caller having to stay on the call and leave the voicemail for each person. The downside is it's not personalized. So instead of saying, like if I call Eduardo, hi Eduardo, this is Doug Wendt, okay? The upside is you can rip through the volume and get your caller talking to actual people. What's dangerous is when a caller spends 90% of their time leaving voicemails. That just depresses the heck out of people. So I encourage, even though voicemail drops are not as effective as live voicemails, it gives you a chance to increase the percentage of call time that is spent talking to folks. And at the end of the day, that's where the magic happens. I don't think voicemails are a waste of time, okay? But I view them as a marketing effort, okay? The actual sales meetings are going to come from the live conversations that happen to catch so-and-so and have a good initial conversation. So, I mean, we could do a whole workshop on cold outreach, and I'm happy to, by the way, but hopefully those are 3 good initial points to consider. So now let's talk about proposals. It really goes back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago with the other questions. And that is that Demetris asked, and that is, don't send proposals, period. Okay. If it's an RFP, you have to send it. I understand that. Everything outside of an RFP where you're required by a large corporation or a government entity to send a proposal, don't send proposals. Require meetings to present proposals. Okay. Because you spend hours building it and then you send it to them and then it sits in their inbox. Or in the old days, I would FedEx them and they would sit. I would have spent $25 to FedEx something that sits on someone's desk for months. Don't send proposals, present proposals. Send it after the meeting. That way you maintain control. Is that possible all the time? No, but it's possible 8 or 9 out of 10 times. So hold to that standard. The last point is I don't necessarily suggest charging for proposals. What I do suggest is that you break your proposal process into 2 components. One is more of a light or rough proposal, like, Frank, we put together an outline of what you want to have achieved in this project. I'm going to put some, potential dollar amounts to it, some key steps and an initial outline. Let's go through that together as a collaborative exercise and then, build the details out and make sure we're developing what you want. Now it's a collaborative discussion. Okay. That would be free, but then also offer clients the option of a paid assessment or a paid planning engagement. So I tell clients this all the time. You can have us build a proposal, or if your requirements are particularly complex or you feel that you need something highly bespoke, you can pay us a relatively small fee. In our case, it's $2,500. So it's not like $200. It's still an investment, but it's also not $25,000, right? You can pay us a fee to do an initial planning report. And that'll have a statement of work for what we would propose to do after, but it'll also be a deliverable that stands on its own. Now you give them sort of a choose your own adventure approach, right? Do you want us to do something more collaborative and light and we'll get to a statement of work and get started, in which case it's free? Or do you want us to sit and do 10, 15 hours of work to build this out, in which case it's a billable engagement? Which would you prefer? Does
Thank
that
you.
help? Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully that gave you some food for thought.
It does. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And again, and then I'll hand it back to Doug and make sure other questions, because I don't want to miss anybody. Again, decisions don't happen without discussions. Discussions require meetings. The meeting is your best friend. Okay, the meeting is your best friend. That's really key. I know it's so easy to be like, great, thanks for all this. I'll get you a proposal. I beg you, all of us, including myself, try not to do it. Make that the 1 out of every 10 scenario. The 9 out of every 10 is you get that next meeting set and you present. And then in that meeting, they're going to say, great, thanks for reviewing the proposal. Now send it to me and we'll let you know. And you say, excellent. Let's plan to meet next Tuesday so that whatever questions you've gathered from the team, we can answer. And if you're ready to proceed, we can sign. And if you're not, we can discuss the decision process. Keep the meeting cadence going. That is so important. Back to you, Doug.
That's brilliant. For some reason, I never understood that until this moment. And just that alone was well worth the cost of admission here today. And there were a number of other things that you said that I thought were really brilliant. This, I think, is one of the best ones that we've done. Really, really great. I don't see any additional hands, and we're just right about at the top of the hour. So my recommendation is that we finish up this program maybe with a minute or two of you recapping what we just heard. What are the most important points for you? Because you had a lot of gems today. What did you have for breakfast, by the way? I want that.
It's called a Starbucks venti mocha. Thank you very much. I did want to go. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Now we're talking.
How come mine doesn't have the power that yours has? It must be a New York thing.
Thank you, my friend. I do want to go back and answer Eduardo's question, which I sort of addressed, but not head on. And that is how to elicit the pricing piece, the budget piece. The answer is give them a guide to coming up with a budget. And I'll show you an example. I actually did this as a sales sheet that we give to clients. In fact, Doug, I actually have to give this to you. So we've told clients, here's how much your project is going to cost based upon their requirements. Do something like this for your own business. Like, for example, I have a friend who does trademark law, and I think she has 3 categories. I just want to file a trademark for, a secondary product or service versus I want this trademark for the entire company and brand. I want to go global versus I'm building a portfolio of trademarks for licensing, good, better, best kind of a thing. In this case, in our business, we've organized this into 4 categories. Why do I say this? I say it because customers usually don't know what the budget should be. So they either don't have one or they bring the wrong one. 1 out of every 10 prospects I talk to has done the kind of project that we're doing with them before. And they're like, we know it's going to cost between X and Y, but that's literally 1 out of every 10. That's a really low ratio to rely on or trust that they know what the budget should be. This also gives you an opportunity to have the budget discussion without putting them on the spot. Don't get me wrong, sometimes I'll flat out ask them, but I'll give them a range. I'll say most of our clients are, typically will do projects between X and Y. Sometimes because of these key factors, they'll spend between, A and B. Are we in a range that fits with what you're envisioning for this initiative? Is this something that you set aside capital expenditure funds for this year? And are we in range? And they'll typically flat out tell me, yes, no. That's okay. Great. Now, how do we kind of talk about what the right focus should be? Okay. So educate them, give them categories to work with. Okay. Don't be afraid of that. And that gets away from the price. It gets into a discussion of what they want to accomplish for how much they want to spend. I'll leave you one last nugget that hopefully is of value. Something we changed this year. Literally, as of the last few months, we used to call these our proposals. Now we call them statements of work, and we put a version number on all of them, and we didn't do that before. And the reason is what we tell clients is it's not a proposal. A proposal is, hey, I think you should do X and how much it's going to cost. I say this is a statement of work, and it's a draft statement of work, and this is version 1. We're going to go back and forth until we get the right version for you. The point being, the cost of the service is not about your pricing. It's about what they want to achieve. You want a lower price, reduce the scope of the project. You want a higher price, which some people do. I've actually had the rare customers say, I think it should be more expensive. Maybe we didn't clarify all that we want involved. Believe it or not, it does happen. Not often, but it does. Okay. Let the customer drive the budget for themselves based upon their objectives, and you guide them into aligning their budget and their objectives. Okay. And that gets you out of the place of, well, what's your hourly rate and how much will it cost? Well, you're the person in the driver's seat. I'm simply listening and providing back to you a statement of work, a draft statement of work to match your goals. So I'm trying to keep myself positioned as a thoughtful advisor and not as a potential vendor who's throwing pricing at them or giving them a proposal. Okay. So I hope that gives some additional food for thought. Doug, any closing comments before we wrap today?
You're brilliant. You are definitely the smarter and more handsome Doug. So thank you so much for sharing all this today. And the recording, of course, will be available for everyone. And Jem will see to that. So this is something I'd want to hear again because you had so many different gems in it. So thank you so much. No pun intended, by the way there. Thank you so much for all that you do. And hey, everybody, have a great rest of your day. Go out now and sell more effectively. Maybe take a pause, spend a few hours and think about what Doug mentioned. And that's what I'm doing. I've got a whole list of notes here. I'm going to change everything. So thank you so much, Doug. Take care.
Thank you all. I appreciate it, everybody. It's an honor to be a part of this amazing community. Thank you all and have a great Global Chamber Day, everyone.
Thank you, Doug. This has
Thank
been great.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Likewise. Bye-bye,
Thanks,
everyone.
Eduardo. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Doug.
For being in the call. And Demetrius, you're always amazing. Thank you. And Ruby. John, thank you for joining. And Olivier, you were first in. Thank you for joining.
You're welcome.